Hi, my name is Margret. In this program along exercise, we are practicing the use of doc comments. We will reference the documentation from Oracle for guidance on how to write doc comments that work well with the Javadoc tool and that allow us to leverage the benefits of auto-generated HTML documentations. In order to write doc comments, we need some classes. So let's start with a closer look at the UML class diagrams. Here we have three classes. Address label has the following attributes: a first name, a last name, and an address. In addition, it has a constructor, an overridden toString method, and the ability to print a label. Address has a street, city, state, and zip code. It has a constructor and getters for each of the fields. State is an enum class. It knows the 52-letter abbreviations of the US states. In this diagram, each class seems separate, and yet they are connected. An address label has an address, and an address has a state. When we want to focus on the relationship between those classes, we can exchange the field entries with arrows, like this. Notice, the field entries are no longer there. Instead, we have some arrows that indicate the has a relationship. An address label has an address, and an address has a state. And we can see the private field with the name address is of type address. The private field state is of type state. Let's go to Eclipse and start the implementation. The first step is creating a package. Here I go to source, this is my source folder. I right click, that brings up a context menu, and I go to new. So here are my new options. I want a package. I'm clicking on it. Here in my package I'm choosing a name. I'm going to call my package labels because those are address labels. Notice the first letter is lowercase because packages in Java should be camel cased. At this point I can finish, and there we are. We have an empty package labels. And now we're going to add some classes. At this point I'm right clicking the empty package labels. I right click, again I go to new, and this time I go to class. I'm going to create a new class, and my new class is in package labels, I can see that, and the name of my class is address label. So here I say finish. That gives me a public class address label in my package labels. I go back to my package labels in my package explorer. This is the window here on the left hand side. I right click labels, create a second class, and this second class is called address. Now I need a third class. Again I go to my package labels, right click, new. This time I want an enum. I could create a class and just change the keyword, but Eclipse offers me an extra enum option, so I'm going to use that one. My enum is called state. And so here we can see my state is created with the enum keyword already. There's one more class which was not shown on the UML class diagram, but we add it anyhow. It's going to be a test client. So here I go one more time to my package. I add yet another class, and this new class is called label app because this is the test client for my labels. And here is a checkbox. It says, would you like to include the main method? That's a nice offer because I'm not into typing, so I check that, finish, and here I can see I have my test client, and it conveniently includes my main method already. So let's start implementing the enum state. I go here to state, and we're going to add the individual enum constants like Alabama, Alaska, etc. I'm going to copy them over. Here they are. Now we have our first opportunity to write a doc comment. Every public class, and enums are classes in Java, should have a corresponding doc comment. I'm going to enter /*, enter. And Eclipse provides me with a snippet to help me get started. It includes the tag author with my username. This is a good moment to check whether the username that is stored in Eclipse is also appropriate for the context where I want to use my code. If not, I can change the settings of Eclipse, or I can change the name right here. Eclipse provided me with a starting point for my doc comment, but an important part is missing: the description of the class. Let's take a moment to look at the Oracle documentation for guidance on how to write good descriptions in this context. Here is a link to the description section. I'm not going to read out loud everything, but I want to focus on one sentence in particular. The first sentence of each doc comment should be a summary sentence, containing a concise but complete description of the API item. Let's try to do that. So here I could have something like 2 letter abbreviations of the US states. That describes what my enum is storing in one summary sentence. At this point I'm going to save, and we are moving on to the next class. Let's have a look at the UML class diagram again. Here, let's focus on class address. I would like you to take a moment to implement the fields street, city, state, and zip. Give yourself a moment, pause the video. When you're ready, press continue. Here is something to compare it with. Let's save and see what else we need for class address. At this point we did the fields. Now we're going to create the constructor. Eclipse can generate code snippets for us. This means less typing and more productivity. Let's see how we can take advantage of this opportunity. In my editor, I'm going to right-click. I go to Source, Generate Constructor using Fields. I can see all 4 of my fields with a check, which is good because I want to initialize all of those fields in my constructor. Also, there are 2 more checkboxes down here. They both should be checked. One, to omit the call to the default constructor of the superclass. There's no need to call the constructor of the superclass when deriving from object. And the other one, because we want to generate constructor comments. Let's press OK. Here is my constructor. I'm going to add a single empty line to group the fields and separate them from my constructor. Notice, in my doc comment, there are param tags. Let's have another look at the Oracle side for some guidance on how to write documentation for parameters. I'm still in the section descriptions and I'm scrolling down, and here is the style guide. This is a great resource for writing good doc comments. Please take some time to explore the different guidelines and recommendations on your own. I'm going to point out 3 areas to help you get started. One of them has to do with verb phrases. It's right here. Okay to use phrases instead of complete sentences in the interest of brevity. It holds especially in the initial summary and in the parameter text descriptions. You see it especially often in the initial summary with methods, and It ties in with the recommendation right below where it says use third person descriptive, not second person prescriptive. So when we use those verb phrases, we should say gets the label, not get the label. Prints the receipt, not print the receipt. Third person S when we use verb phrases. There's one more guideline that I would like to point out. It is right here and it reads, add description beyond the API name. Again, it gives us examples. So the first one is something we should not do. We have a method, it is called setTooltipText, and when you look at the comment it says sets the tooltip text. It is correct, it describes what the method is doing. It is a verb phrase that starts with third person singular, and yet it is not helpful. Typically, people read the comment when they look for more information than what is already provided in the method name. So here is a second example, that's the preferred one. And again, we look at the method setTooltipText, but the description of our doc comment looks quite different. This time it says registers the text to display in a tooltip. Now it gives us additional information. The information we are setting here is the information that will be displayed. And it follows up with a sentence. It says the text displays when the cursor lingers over the component. So that is really helpful if somebody is wondering what is a tooltip text anyhow. So whenever we provide doc comments, we should start with the summary, can be a verb phrase. If we do that, third person S, and we should provide additional information, at least rephrase, use slightly different words in case a question was left open after reading the name. At this point, we are going back to the code. Here we have our constructor. It says street, and we could leave a comment like street address. Now city is pretty explanatory, but with state we could say US state. And when we have zip, we could add this is the zip code. Or even more specific, we could just say this is the 5-digit zip code, because we used an integer to represent it. This constructor doesn't perform any input validation or anything outside of the typical functionality, and so I could just write something quite generic like constructor initializes the fields. At this point we have fields and we have a constructor. Let's have a look at the UML class diagram to see what else we need for our implementation of class address. We got quite far, but there are still the 4 getters that need to be implemented. Let's use again the code snippets from Eclipse to speed us up. I'm going to right click in my editor, I go to source, and this time I'm going to generate getters and setters. There are my 4 fields, but all I want are the getters, so I'm going to choose the button select getters right here. Notice we have the generate method comments selected, and at this point I say OK. And there are my 4 getters. They don't have a description of the getter yet. Give yourself a moment, add a description. Pause the video. When you're ready, press continue. Here is something to compare it with. I was using a verb phrase that describes what the getter is doing, and I added a little bit additional information more than just get street. So I would say returns the street address. That's why you also see the third person S in the verb phrases of my method descriptions. Returns the 2-letter abbreviation, returns the zip code, etc. There's one last thing we still need to do. we need to add a comment for the class itself. So here it says public class address. We're going to add a doc comment /*, enter. It provides me already with the author tag and my username. And I'm going to add a comment here. Let's say US address that is not a PO box. So this describes what this class is representing. It's an address, not just any address, an address from the United States, and also we did not account for PO boxes. At that point, let's go back to the UML class diagram. Let's see what other work still needs to be done. The class that is still missing is the class address label. Please take a moment, implement the 3 fields including address and the constructor. Pause the video. When you're done, press continue. Here is something to compare it with. We have 3 private fields. We have an address and we have a doc comment that describes the 3 parameters, and it tells us that we have here the constructor of class address label. Let's go back to the UML class diagram. There's still more work to do. I can see toString. This is an overwritten method from class object, and Eclipse can help me to get started. I'm going to right click, I go to source, and here is a possibility to have the toString method generated. I'm going to click on it, and we can decide how many fields should be included in the toString method. In our case, let's just include all of them and take the default implementation. I'm just going to print OK, and here is the toString method. Notice the @override annotation. It indicates that we are providing an implementation for a method that has already been declared, in our case, in the class object. Also note that the document that has been included is not Javadoc. I'm stepping over to the Oracle site, scrolling a little bit up to the style guide, and right above it tells us about the automatic reuse of method comments. One situation when doc comments can be reused is when a method in a class overrides a method in a superclass. Because of that, we don't have to provide our own doc comment. The doc comment that has been written in class object will be used. At this point, we're nearly finished. I'm going back to the UML class diagram. There's one last method, print label. It has no parameters and it returns nothing. By the way, this is not proper UML. The return type should be listed after the method name, separated by a colon. And in situations where the method returns nothing, where the return type is void, no return type is mentioned in UML. So let's implement the print label method. The format of the label should look like this: first name, space, last name, in a separate line, the street address, and then in the third line, the city, comma, state, and the zip code. Give yourself a moment. Implement the method print label. Pause the video. When you're ready, press continue. Here is something to compare it with. Print label method, 3 lines. I used printf, but we could have used print line with a concatenation operator. Because I used printf, I made sure that I have a new line after printing first name and last name. Then I printed the street address, and after that the city, the state, followed by the zip code, and of course we have the comma after the city. Notice I added a doc comment. This is one example. I said prints an address label in the following format, and then I describe how the address label should look like. At this point, we're nearly finished with this class. We're still missing the doc comment for class address label itself. I want you to practice writing the doc comment. Give it a good try, pause the video. When you're done, press continue. Here is something to compare it with. Most likely, your doc comment description looks different. This is just one example how it could be done. I wrote, represents an address label that includes the first and last name of the addressee and his or her address. At this point, we have finished with all three classes. Let's go to the test client and start some testing. Let's get started. I would like to create first an address. I call it address 1. And when I roll over address, that's the type, I can see the doc comment information that we provided. This is a US address that is not a PO box. Now I would like to create the address. I say new uppercase A. At that point I pause and I say Control spacebar. Eclipse provides me with possible ways to complete my statement. So it realizes that I created a variable of type address and suggests to complete my statement with new address, creating an object of type address. It also shows me information about the address constructor. Again, this is the information that we provided as a doc comment. It says it's a constructor that initializes the fields, and here we have a 5-digit zip code, etc. At that point, I can press enter. What that does for me is the following. I get a template to complete it. And the nice thing is I don't need to memorize the order of my parameters. Now it tells me street, and in addition, it tells me street should be of type string. So I'm going to add a street, let's say 137 James Street, and I tab, that takes me to the next parameter. The city is Kent. I tab, Kent happens to be in the state of Washington, so here is state and Washington. Tab, and it has a zip code. The zip code is 98032. And at this point, I have an address. I can also print my address. I say sys out, Control spacebar. That completes system out print line. So we have system out print line, and I'm going to print my address. I always like to start with a short description so the user knows what we're looking at. And here I'm going to print my address. I'm going to save. And oops, there was meant to be a plus, a concatenation operator. I'm going to save, and I'm going to run my code. So here it prints my address. It is not super helpful because we didn't override the toString method from class address. So it only shows me what class object could provide. It tells me this is an address in the package labels, and it is at a certain position. If I would create a second address, and this second address would be a different address, maybe just 2 houses down the street. I'm going to run it. Then I can see those are 2 distinct objects of type address in my package labels. I'm going to print a single empty line just to structure my code, because now I want to do something else. I want to create an address label. And when I roll over address label, again we can see the information we provided with our doc comment, represents an address label, etc. And again, I can just say uppercase A, Control Spacebar. This time Eclipse understands that we need an address label to complete that assignment. We can see the doc comments. I'm going to press enter and I'm going to provide a first name. The first name is Dan. The last name is Smith, and the address is my address 1. That's where Dan is living. And at this point I'm going to print my address label. Sys out and we're going to run the code. And I can see my address label is an address label, first name Dan, last name Smith, and the address is what we saw already above. Notice the same number. We know this is the same object we are referencing here. However, I would like to have a nice printed label that I could use for my envelope. So we are going to do that. I'm going to use my address label to print the label. Let's roll over again. So here I can see the doc comment we wrote for the print label method. It says prints an address label in the following format. First name, last name, address. Notice I created 3 distinct lines, yet they are no longer visible here. Everything is just listed next to the other. When I go right here at the bottom triangle, I can change the size of the window. And as I make it more narrow, the text flows in the next line. It just fills up every line. What I would like though is to show the actual format, to show the line breaks that I had in my doc comment. There is a way to do that. So I'm going back to my address label. I'm finding the method print label, and a way to tell Eclipse that there should be a line break is the break tag. So this is a tag from HTML. Notice it is displayed in a different color. In my case it is kind of a grayish tone, and when I use those break tags I get line breaks, but it doesn't display the pointed brackets. I'm going to save, I'm going back to my label app, and I'm going to roll over again. This time I can only see first name, last name. It doesn't adjust the window size automatically, but I can do that. So as I make my window bigger, I can see the format as intended. If I would make it too narrow, I would still get a line break in addition. But the ones I specified explicitly with my break tag, they are going to remain. Let's run the code. So here I can see Dan Smith, address in Kent, Washington, nicely displayed. We haven't tested the getters yet, so I could go back to, let's say, address 1, and I could print each element of the address separately. For example, I could say address 1 and here get the street, and we're going to follow that with a space, and then address 1 get the city, and again a space, and address 1 get the state, and again a space, and my address 1 get the zip code. I'm going to narrow the left hand side so we can see all of the code here. At this point I'm going to save, I'm going to run it again, and we can see the address is 137 James Street in Kent, Washington 98032. So we can access all the different parts of the address, but because we didn't override the toString method, I get this kind of a display when I try to print the address directly. This was all I wanted to show you in this program along exercise. I hope it helped you to feel more comfortable writing doc comments. Have a great day.